This podcast is a Uniting Heart and Soul production and was recorded on land that was stolen nearly 250 years ago. Filthy Hope was conceived and dreamt on Gadigal and Birrabirragal country, and this episode was recorded on Darramurragal country. We acknowledge these peoples as the traditional owners of these lands and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We at Filthy Hope pay homage to the traditions of storytelling when we share stories on this podcast. Hello and welcome back to Filthy Hope, a podcast from Uniting Heart and Soul in Wallara, where we dive into the grey spaces where Jesus, life and culture intersect. I'm your host, Jonty, Creative Director at Uniting Heart and Soul, and joining me this week is Steve Molkentin, aka Molk, who works for Pulse in the Uniting Church in spaces of young adult engagement. If you want to check out more of what Pulse are doing with young people in the Uniting Church, you can visit them on socials or on their website, links to which will be down below in the show notes. Please enjoy episode 30 of Filthy Hope. Well, let's do an official welcome. Molk, welcome to the show.
Hey, look, it's great to be welcomed.
It's what we offer here at the podcast.
Here's a welcome.
Yeah.
Tacit acknowledgement.
Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate your time. Tell me, who are you and what do you do for our listeners?
Hello, my name is Molk and I create trouble. Look, the reality is, Molk is not my real name. Spoilers. Stephen Molkentin, if I'm in real trouble, and that's normally from my wife or was from my mum. But otherwise, like, there's not that many Molkentins in Australia, but somehow I scored the nickname. I'm Molk, which is fine. It's a branding exercise like Cher and Kylie and Madonna. I love Jesus first and foremost, and I'm very fortunate to have been a professional Christian for the past 6 years, particularly focused on ministry with young people. And in the role that I'm in right now, which is with the Pulse team, which is a New South Wales ACT Synod of the Uniting Church wide team, we focus on ministry with young people from the Far North Coast out to Broken Hill, down to the Riverina and across to Eden. Sort of that, the whole space. I work as a part of a team, as I said, with three incredible women, Reverend Karen Mitchell-Lambert, Pastor Joyce Tungy, Pastor Offa Foykow, and we are about trying to encourage and develop and resource the church to engage better or even at all in ministry with young people. So young people, I top out at about 30-ish. So three clear boundaries: children's and families, youth, and young adults, which is the stream that I'm the lead for, young adults.
Yeah, awesome. And so Pulse started, I think, if I'm correct, with our friend Braden, who I'm actually going to have a look at trying to get on the podcast at some point as well.
Great.
You and Braden go back a long way, don't you?
We were introduced, it feels like 1,000 years ago, thanks to COVID, but it wasn't. But we're nearly that old. We can see it from there. And look, we became firm friends because we share a lot of the same ideas and feelings on things and that sort of stuff. He sold the synod on the idea of Pulse, that there was a need for a team of people functioning within the synod to do all of the things that I just talked about and probably even a bit more. And they said, yes, we will fund that for ideally forever, realistically 5 to 10 years. We'll see how we go. So we got it up And then he was called down to Victoria to go, and he's working as a chaplain down there at Wesley College. And so a team had to be found. Joyce started first, then Kaz, and Offa started about 2 weeks before me. I'm the youngest of the Pulse team members. I started in October 2019. So prior to that, I was working for Queensland Synod in a similar-ish digital-focused youth ministry role.
Mm. And so my follow-up question there is, Pulse was created out of a need that was identified.
Yes.
What were those needs, and like, are they still needing to be filled? Like, what are the things that clearly were identified back then? And I'm assuming, I know this is a
Dorothy Dixon,
a loaded question that I'm underarming over to you. But like, what
Sure.
are the gaps? What are the needs for young adults that resulted in Pulse being brought up?
Oh, look, if I can answer that with a little bit of a history lesson, Jonty, if that's okay.
Please.
I've grown up in the Uniting Church, and I love this movement deeply. I love what it stands for, and when it's at its best, which lately isn't often, it speaks great truth and hope in Jesus and provides a just overwhelming welcome, deeply felt within the grace and mercy of God to everybody. So I have been a part of this whole thing, dragged up at the front of Uniting Church ever since I was a little kid. I've always felt a call into ministry with young people and have paid keen attention to that through my many years as I've stayed close to the church and been a part of it. And in Queensland, at least, and I know that the similar kind of process went through here. In Queensland, we had a thing called the Youth and Children's Ministry Unit, YACMU, legendary within the Uniting Church for ministry with young people. And I know there was a mission unit similar in New South Wales that kind of saw a similar fate. And that was I'm going to say it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, the National Church, the Assembly, decided that the specified ministry of youth worker. So when we look at people who are in ministry, wow, this is all over the place. I'm sorry.
No, this is good.
When you are called into formal ministry within the life of the Uniting Church, right now today, you can be called into the ministry of the Word, where you become a Rev, the ministry of deacon, where you also become a Rev, but with a different focus, more of a community. That said, most of the deacons that are involved in the Uniting Church, at least in this synod, are either working as aged care chaplains or ministers in placement. Well done, deacons. Congratulations. And there was back in the day, you can also be a specified ministry of pastor, which is what I'm currently called and working into, which is kind of like that ministry of the Word, ministry of deacon role, except that it is within the role that I'm employed in, if that makes sense. So whereas when you're called into deacon or Rev ministry, that is a lifetime call, a commitment, vocational call into ministry. Specified ministry of pastor is in the place that you're in for the period of that time. So if I leave and go into another role that is determined and classified to be a specified ministry of pastor, I technically close my ministry and then get recommissioned. Whereas a minister gets inducted just into their new placements each time they move. And there's a different relationship with the church and all sorts of things. The benefit around specified ministry of pastor is that it sees the gifts and skills and talents that people can bring into various roles and acknowledges that within that, the church supports and releases them into the full depth and breadth of ministry and can support them and also financially / tax break, get some benefit around supporting them. Today. Back in the day, there used to be a thing called the specified ministry of youth worker. Similar kind of vibe, full-time role, like Rev, except that this was always so it was a specific focus on ministry with young people. So there was training, like undergraduate, tertiary training on ministry, understanding young people, all of those sorts of things. And the key difference, however, was out of the box, youth workers couldn't baptize and didn't have magic fingers, couldn't lead communion, the two sacraments within the life of our movement. So straight away, independent of our church talking about, everyone being open to ministry and everyone's called to be a part of things in different ways, it's set unofficially almost a tiered structure. Here's the minister, and below them is the youth worker, not because they were lesser. They basically all did the same training. Just because if you were the fortunate congregation to have both a youth worker and a minister, when money got tight, who are you going to get rid of? Not the one that can give you communion and baptize people. You'll get rid of the one that can't. Now, of course, there are big asterisks on that. If you did the training as a youth worker and the presbytery so allowed it, you could have magic fingers. You could baptize if that was the need. And sometimes there were youth workers that did get those approvals from their presbytery in their placements. In the late 90s, early 2000s, the Uniting Church went, things are getting expensive and we've got all these youth workers that can't find placements. And maybe, how about we just get rid of this? I'm paraphrasing, right? This is the Molk version of history. Let's get rid of all of those specified ministry of youth worker things and offer them to either step into, because they've done the training, upskill so that they can, or unless you're going to do the full degree, you can't, turn them into revs, right? A much more functional, usable resource, if we look at it like that from the church's perspective, because now youth worker Frank is now Reverend Frank, and Reverend Frank can go anywhere and work for the church in any situation. With that, it had, I won't say it already started, but we saw a steep decline in young people within the life of the church. And I don't necessarily mean small people, because often, particularly at that age, you're getting dragged along with mum and dad. But certainly with less focus on that and a much more effort leaning on volunteers to say, now you have to do it. Absolutely, young adult and youth ministry suffered because those specialist practitioners who saw and valued highly those young people, not that revs don't, but they have a much broader remit. So I'm not crapping on them. The ministry vanished. So what do you think the outcome of that's going to be? Nothing. Everything goes away. And in the same light, the ability to fund these national or these statewide units, YACMU and the crew down in New South Wales ACT, the money dried up. And there was some dysfunction, particularly around the Queensland unit. And so it wrapped up. And I'm going to say where we stand in the year of our Lord, 2022, nearly 23, up until Pulse came along down here, and certainly in Queensland, there's still nothing, a near 10-year gap of, there was a long tail for the youth unit down here in New South Wales, but significant investment in nothing. It had been nothing. So consequently, the reap what you sow mechanism meant that young people either were completely disillusioned and didn't engage, or were dragged off into other denominations and other faith experiences. And look, if they're engaged in a spiritual journey where they are finding faith, love, and hope in Jesus, wherever that finds them, whatever denomination that finds them, aces. The net result of ministry and engaging in the deep mission of God has to be about people that don't know Jesus coming into relationship with Jesus. It's not about deck chairs on the Titanic and why does that youth group down the road have 25 more people and we can't get anybody. There's elements of how can we support them and care for them, and that's part of what I think the Uniting Church has to offer. But this engagement in how do we care for, love, develop, grow young disciples of Jesus has become a really rocky road. And for the church to, at least in this synod, and this is where I'm finding great hope and great support, I have to say, for what Pulse are trying to do, for us to get the opportunity to engage in that intentionally and to have, as of right now today, the synod has a key directions, 5 key foci for the next, while. And one of them is ministry with young people. It's actually, I don't even know what one of the things. So it's like one of them is engaging deeper ministry with Indigenous people. Something else, ministry with young people. So as one of those 5 key pillars, the future directions of this synod, it means that Pulse absolutely has a mandate to work really hard with those places where there is life in ministry with young people, to encourage those congregations that are willing to step out boldly and re-engage or engage for the first time in some cases in ministry with young people, we get to go hard. And it means there's an element of even the prophetic in that, because the difficulty we face within the life of our movement is that there is a yawning chasm between little people and people, roughly speaking, 40 to 49. And everyone goes, yeah, we really need to do something about that, and no one wants to do anything about it, or so few people want to do anything about that. So how do we do that? We need to be consistent in the way we engage in the life of the gospel. We need to be open to recognizing that I've gotten on my sermon. I'm sorry, Jonty. We need to absolutely lean into the fact that there is no retirement age mentioned in the Great Commission in Matthew 28. That when Jesus calls us, the great commandment that he offers to us in John is to love one another because I've loved you. And there's no age barrier on that. And no one, certainly Pulse is not asking anybody, and certainly nobody over 60, but we're not asking anybody to run a youth group. All we're telling them, all we're offering them is an opportunity to journey with young people, to absolutely intentionally care about them and let God do God's thing in the midst of that. Help them see how God is at work in their life. I think that's a very long answer to what was a very easy question.
No, that's what I was hoping was going to happen.
Sorry, mate.
No, that's great. I think one of the interesting things that a few things resonated with me there, but I think one of the challenges that I've recognized along the way in taking part in this journey of, I mean, counting myself as a young adult, so sort of being amongst it as well.
Yes,
is something that I've recognized along the way a little bit is that often the people in that, I mean, you mentioned that sort of 40 to 49 bracket, but often even the bracket older than that.
Yep.
Really, really wanting to be a part in young people's lives and wanting to take up that challenge and having really great intentions, but actually coming to that with this idea of what they think young people need in their lives that is born out of. My dad actually, he was talking about this not long ago, and it kind of clicked for me that like a lot of these people, the big movement that they experienced were when they were younger were things like the Billy Graham Crusades, events that brought huge numbers of people into church buildings.
Yes.
Kind of waiting for and expecting the next XYZ, whatever it is that they experienced in their day.
Sure.
It's kind of, you can't circle that square. Like, it's not going to happen for young people today. And if it does, great. But that's not the experience that lots of, like, broadly, that's not the experience that young people are having with faith today. It's not this massive cultural movement because, like...
Oh, and with all good reason, right? Like, sorry to jump in, but I think you hit the nail on the head a little, or your dad did, both of you did, with this recognition that, you know, Billy Graham and the tent crusades or the arena crusades that he did were an amazing moment in time. And he would come and preach up a storm, and I think they landed so well because of the time that they were, where largely Christianity was the dominant faith within, you know, modern first world of the era, Australia, America, England, all the rest of it. Like these, at the time, things like Islam, Hinduism, even broader spirituality stuff, right, was fringe at best, or happened over in those countries where we sent missionaries to go and take Jesus to them, right, that kind of stuff. There was no lesser spiritual hunger. It's just that Christianity was the dominant faith. Flash forward, generational jump of at least one, maybe two, to now, and all of those things, like it is, you want to engage young people in a spiritual conversation, it is a smorgasbord of faith options. And it's everything from, you know, I'm going to sound dismissive, and I don't mean to, but people taking tarot cards or bloody horoscopes seriously through to, recognized other faith opportunities and denominations, people finding crystals and all of these things, right? Everything's before we step into let's call them defined faith movements. Um, People are encouraged to find their truth. And there is heaps of truths to be found. It is, from a Christian perspective, we look at them and go, well, cool, actually, here's some stuff. But people will happily engage in those, whatever they find themselves in from a spiritual perspective, which is why we have this great dichotomy of when you talk to young people about things of faith, there's often heaps of engagement. However, they just don't want to buy what you're selling because, and let's be fair, Christianity has a legacy and it is not amazing. The glory of God engaging humankind in God's mission has meant that humankind have righteously screwed it up more than once, done things that have been horrendous, killed people in the name of, spreading the gospel, which seems incredibly antithetical, post Jesus. Horrendous things have happened with, and I'm talking in the last 150, 200 years, horrendous things have happened within the life of church in the name of Jesus that the church now has to pay the piper for. And rightly so. We have absolutely a responsibility to take seriously reparations around what it means for the people that the church hurt. And in more than one case, the person who hurt them is no longer alive. That does not diminish our responsibility. It will be expensive. It will be painful. We have, at a really liminal level, a PR problem up the wazoo, not only because of this, but that's a big part of it. And it honestly, as I said, to circle back, because there's so many options around faith discussion, spiritualism, and those kinds of questions, Christianity is a tough sell when even within, Christianity, there's so many splinter groups and denominations. Well, why can't you all just get along? Well, we do. Yeah, but the Baptists and you guys and these guys and those guys and those guys and the Anglicans and the Sydney Anglican, even within the Anglican movement, right? It's not a denomination, but the clear Sydney Anglicanism within Anglicanism has caused its own ructions, just as there is ructions within our own faith movement. It's not unreasonable for people outside Christianity to look at it and go, you guys can't even work it out yourselves. So we need to get on top of that. And that's even stuff before we have to address, the fact that it is, I won't say it's never been cooler, but it's just never been more acceptable to go, you're born, you live, you die. Atheism is absolutely, or agnosticism is absolutely acceptable in a faith expression, even though atheists would say it's not an expression of faith. I think it's a pretty fair statement to say a rejection of faith is still an expression of faith. So, like you step on a uni campus or you talk to a bunch of young adults, and it is everything all at once. So engaging in that stuff makes it intimidating for a movement like ours, where our demos skew really old and their lived experience was Billy Graham, or everybody just came to church, or we had a youth group of 150. Why can't we have that again? So, I mean, that's just our starting place to then land into. So what does it mean? How do we develop? And I agree, that doesn't mean there's not room for an evangelist to step in and have a Billy Graham-esque, Holy Spirit effect on, the broad population. If I'm going to be really bold, the other thing that the Billy Graham Crusades did was it allowed people to shut up about their faith. And that has been, and the legacy of that today is unhelpful, because in polite company from particularly the 50s, what didn't you talk about in polite company? You didn't talk about faith and politics. So this idea of people sharing and please, a lot of these are generalizations. We're not getting sharp and pointy at anyone. We now have a much older generations within our church that largely are not used to talking about their faith, because you don't talk about it, because it's the polite. You drag people to church and you let the minister talk about faith, and on you go. When the reality is, and we know this, for every Billy Graham, we need millions of Christians to stand up and be living their faith and being ready to go, not stand on the corner on a milk crate and shout at people. That's not going to help anybody. Talk to your friends, engage in conversation, not in a way that is, I need to win this soul for Jesus, intentionally caring about them. If they are your friends, they will absolutely be open to hearing you in various situations, sharing how your faith comforts you, helps you, grows you, develops you, and they should see it before you talk about it. You know, that interpersonal relationship evangelism, if we want to give it a name, cannot be beaten, because that's the example of Jesus. For every Billy Graham Jesus Sermon on the Mount stuff, you had Jesus talking to the woman at the well. You had Jesus helping the guy that had 1 million spirits in him. You had Jesus engaging in one-on-one relationship. And if we're not going to do that, then we all need to go and start Billy Graham crusades. Otherwise, we are not engaging in what God calls us to participate in, and that is helping the world be reconciled with its creator.
Something pinged in my brain about something you were saying earlier. I think when so many different things there, but when
I talk a lot. It's all right, Jonty.
I'm just trying to decide which thread to go down. I think something that I think I've sort of come to discover over the last couple of years in the way that navigating how well-intentioned people of older generations engage with younger people, the things that have worked, like capital W, like just been unreal for my communities, have been the ongoing, sustained inputs into people's lives.
Yep.
Not the, we'll throw $250 at this ministry, job done, tick.
Yeah.
The hands off, move on. It's the come and have dinner at our house every last 2 years, for example. Because then it's not just this tokenist, not that it can be tokenistic, it's not always, but it's not just this ticking a box, I feel like I've done a good job by investing in this person that I never have to talk to again. It's like a genuine, like they become a person in your life. And I've seen situations where one or two like older people, about parents' generation and older, have suddenly become mentor figures for like 20 different people. And you're like,
older people, thanks, mate. Yep.
Older than my parents. Yeah. And like that's huge. And that's not something that's going all the way back to the beginning of this conversation about that gap that we have since the ministry roles changed. That's a role in people's lives in the church that I have seen almost vanish over the last 10, 15 years in my experience being a young person in the church. And all of a sudden it's back, but not because the church invested in some brand spanker's new youth worker. It's just because a handful of people were like, we see it, we're going to fill it.
Mate, like all the bells are ringing for me. And because I agree, right? It's relationship stuff. One of the things that Pulse is really, really positive about and really wants to engage congregations in, the Fuller Youth Institute did a whole bunch of research in the States. However, it has really direct application here in Australia. And that research turned into a book called Growing Young, the Green Book, most youth workers would know it as. And it speaks of 6 core commitments of congregations that are successfully growing young. And by that, they don't mean just, drawing in lots of young people, though that's often the outcome. They mean a church that takes seriously ministry with young people and develops an understanding about how the whole church is involved in that. One of those 6 core commitments, they recognize as fueling a warm community. So a place where young people feel welcome and accepted. And of course, this extends into their parents and other people and stuff. It's just that the focus is on young people. And the idea, I'll use this word cautiously because for me, it has some really big baggage on it. The idea that a church should be intergenerational in how it engages in ministry is a positive one. So, Jonty, you've got some experience in ministry with young people. You're across that, particularly now in a safe church context. We have to run ratios of leaders to young people. Yep. Totally reasonable, all good. This idea within Growing Young, Fueling a Warmer Community, what they recommend is actually inverting that ratio and going, if you have a young person within the life of your church, there should be 5 adults other than their parents or carers that intentionally invest time in getting to know them and care for that young person. And I don't mean surface level, like, oh, g'day, Jonty, how you doing? It's good to see you. How was that exam this week? But that's a good start. I mean, Jonty's got he's doing year 11 and he's got a performance on. We're going to all buy a ticket and go on this night. And Jonty will see us. And it's not because we want to big note ourselves. It's the acknowledgement we're here for Jonty, no one else. The only reason we're here, and Jonty will clock that at some point. He will recognize that these 5 adults, whether they come together or they come separately, had no reason for being at my performance or my soccer game or my whatever. And I don't mean go to all of them, but just those key moments in their lives where you're taking the chance to invest in them and show that you care. Be engaged in their life. That stuff is vital. That stuff makes a world of difference. And if it has to start where it's 2 or 3 or 4 adults, and it can be in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 70s, whatever age it is, engaging in with a group of young adults and providing a space for them, having a meal once a month, whatever it looks like, encouraging and engaging that is so important and so much about who the gospel is and who we are to live in that gospel and what that looks like for us. Because it is taking that opportunity to be a servant to God and to those young people. It's great that our older saints are in positions, honestly and obviously, to be able to invest in and spend in ministry. Mate, without them, the Pulse team doesn't exist. I can promise you that. So it's not to ward them off, or ministry in most congregations. We cannot absolve ourselves of our responsibility to engage in the mission of God, particularly with young people, by thinking I put $20 in the plate or I put $200 in the plate. Or, I mean, we've managed to outsource overseas mission. Fine. Let's continue to support that, but let's also encourage people to deeply consider if God is calling them to be a part of that, whatever that looks like. But just going, oh, it's all right, we donate this much money to overseas mission thing, whatever it is, doesn't mean that we then can go, mission done. Let's move on, friends. And especially when it comes to ministry. I mean, when you think about it, mate, every uniting church that I know is within 5 to 10 clicks of at least 3 schools. And every uniting church I know do not have that many young people turning up to their church. So, or to many of the other churches around, right? Christianity is in decline, not just the uniting church. Every faith expression around following Jesus, by sheer numbers, is shrinking. The census tells us that. The National Church Life Survey tells us that. So what are we going to do about it? You know, for I think the first time in nearly ages, and it's become a political and a culture war, and it's rubbish. And I hate the rhetoric that particularly people who hold, conservative views suggest that they're being discriminated against for trying to live out their faith. Holy crap. Have you read the New Testament? Do you understand what it was like to be a Christian when the Romans were oppressing the very country you lived in? Sweet, merciful Jesus. The church has had it too good for too long, and there are too many people that think they are owed an opportunity to just live in their faith and do whatever the hell they want and make decisions about how people can and can't do stuff. And that ship has well sailed.
Yeah, totally.
Let's just mark the time on that, because that'll be the first thing I'll get in trouble for.
That'll be the promo for the week will just be that. I think because it even within, like you said before, within Christianity, that like from the outside looking in, there's so many schisms and different denominational divides that like even just when you're zoomed in that far, as a young person and as someone that maybe is interested in faith, like where do you even start? But then as you zoom out and zoom out and zoom out, it's just like this thing. And I think we talked about like how easy it is to and how popular it is at the moment to be an atheist or agnostic. And I think I'm not trying to, this isn't causation and whatever, but like I think culturally, we're in a, and you can call this because we're digital babies or we've grown up with the internet or all the phrases that older people like to use that end up feeling sort of denigrating or that we culturally we're in a space where we are being forced kind of against our will almost. I mean, we all carry supercomputers around our pocket anyway, that like culturally we are being forced to consider everything all the time, and information and culture is just like this fractured thing that just happens constantly all the time everywhere. And I think Christianity and who Jesus is so at odds with the speed of what that means for us culturally that it's sort of like this, it offers this permanence and this zooming out of who we are and our place in each other's lives that is kind of separate and at odds to the speed at which information and culture moves today.
Yeah.
I often wonder, like, A, what can you do about that? But also B, how do you even start to, on a personal level, crack that open to people?
It's strange, isn't it?
Because a good start is just by having coffee with someone and talking to them for longer than 3 minutes. Like that in itself is.
Oh, hang on, I've just got a text message. Yep. No, exactly. I'm kidding. That's the point. Yeah.
No, exactly. Yeah. And it like it's so rare to just connect with someone for longer than a couple of minutes.
Oh, and I deeply value every opportunity, which is why I can't drink coffee at the moment. It's killing me. I'm happy to sit there and talk to people. There's something about meandering over a coffee and engaging in that conversation that just makes such a difference. It's such a the benefit of having a screen in our pocket that has the answers to everything and contains every piece of information that we've ever known in history is amazing. What it has done, and there's continuing research about this, has led to generational decision paralysis. Nobody wants to make a decision because how do I make a decision when I have all of the information? Whereas back in the day, I've got whatever information I can gather, and it might not be heaps, but I've got to make a decision. Nowadays, we allow people to delay decisions and even put off decisions entirely. And part of that is cultural, and part of that is generational, and part of that is just where we find ourselves. I think the speed issue does have a play into our faith expression and who we are. At the same time, I think that we have never been closer, and the communities and the connection that we can have because of that speed or nature of relationship swells and develops our opportunity for ministry. However, and I say this as a guy who helped build the internet, right? I'm that old. Online community does not replace in real life community. Sure, we've all heard stories of people who, met on World of Warcraft and fell in love and then one moved to the other's country and they got married and they're living a very happy life. Sweet. That's such a small percentage. The reality is, and this is really important post-COVID for congregations to think, have a look at it. We've got our own television station on YouTube now where we put out our services each week. Great. You might be getting people from all over the world watching that. Awesome. Your pastoral responsibility does not extend to them. You cannot be in a developing pastoral relationship with people that you are not in face-to-face relationship with. And I know that there will be people that disagree with that and people that say you can't do it full stop at all. I think you can grow a relationship with them, absolutely. You cannot hold a pastoral relationship with them because it lacks accountability. It lacks the reality of being face-to-face with each other and the notion that when we gather together in place, it is look, it's Marbo, it's the vibe. It's all at once. We are experiencing God at work in that place for that reason. That doesn't mean that God can't be at work with those other people overseas at the same time. Totally can. And maybe they tuned in to watch that service live and the Holy Spirit spoke with them in the same way. Incredible. In an ongoing context, I don't believe can accurately and appropriately serve the mission of God by watching your church service every week and then doing nothing. They have to be involved in their local community because in the same way, when Jesus answered the question of who is my neighbor, I acknowledge that we didn't have iPhones back when Jesus answered the scribe. What Jesus gave that young person and speaks to us now through the ages is a reminder that it is absolutely the way we intentionally invest and involve ourselves in each other's lives that transforms lives for the good of the gospel. You can send an email, you can send a text message, you can do all of the things. If you don't have the relationship up front, it's spam. If you are not engaged together with each other, it's not going to mean a hill of beans. So it's wonderful that I send birthday greetings to people that I know on Facebook that I've met once. Cool. It doesn't mean as much as the people who they actually know, maybe sending them a message or catching up with them, having a coffee or high-fiving them or giving them a present, whatever it is. Because we are deeply relational animals. This is the way God has made us. I think if God had made us to be people that interacted online, we wouldn't care. We wouldn't want to be in each other's faces. We wouldn't want to be a part of things. And we see it so often in our culture, whether we go to concerts, whether we go to performances, whether we go to just being in crowds at New Year's Eve or whatever it is. It's a tangible, you know it, you feel it. I want to be a part of this. I'm here for this. And I think that's God at work in the midst of that gathering. That's why, again, when Jesus talks about where two or three are gathered, he's not meaning about in Zoom. And look, I know that helped us get through COVID. By way of example, when two people decide that they want to get married, it's amazing. Congratulations, friends. When you first meet that someone that fires up your heart and gets the weird feelings in places you maybe didn't have before, you just want to be with them. You want to spend time with them. You don't want to, that might turn into texting and video calls and all sorts of things, but you want to be with them all the time. And your relationship grows and grows and grows and grows for all of those moments. And I've long held the belief that then when you get engaged, your relationship growth flatlines. It doesn't grow because it's that weird interim space between we're going out, we're getting to know each other, we love each other, to then saying we both are committing to getting married. If you get engaged and don't set a date, you're kidding yourselves. Don't even think about it, right? You get engaged, everything flatlines, relationship growth flatlines. It might go up a little bit, but nothing like what you experienced because it becomes about wedding preparation and marriage preparation. You might do a prepare course or whatever, counseling preparation for that. Awesome. But again, relationship growth is not huge. There will be fights, I can promise you. Then you get married. And as you settle into that, ideally, if it's a healthy relationship, it grows. It starts to take off again. You start to learn heaps more about that other person. Hopefully a lot of it's great. Some of it might be surprising. Toilet seat up, down, where they wear their shoes, all those sorts of things. But you learn and you value and you appreciate all of that sort of stuff. So your relationship goes up, levels and up. This is what the church has experienced. COVID meant that we flatlined. All we were doing was marking time, because as great as it was for technology to enable us to be, hey, friends, hey, faithful, let's give you some input, let's encourage you and grow. I can absolutely promise you, I have no data on this, I can absolutely promise you that church growth will have been in the very, very, very small percentile over that period compared to what it was prior to COVID and what it should starting to be now. Because us sharing our faith is welcoming people into a community that they get to know and be appreciated in and be loved as a part of. And mate, until we're all wearing those amazing suits where I can feel you touching me through the internet, it's not the same.
That haptic technology on the
yeah, it's giving me chills.
I think I've been thinking about this as we've been talking, and I think I've brought this up on this podcast before. But I think another reality of being a young person at all, let alone in the church, is that there is this. I'm trying not to paint with too broad a brush, but there is a reality that as a young person encountering the world at a certain place in history at a certain age, where the totality of what you have experienced of life and of faith and of church and of whatever results in often a sense of nihilism. And I don't mean nihilism like everything sucks and I just want to die. Like this kind of hyper.
Have you been to some of our churches, Jonty? Sorry, that's unfair.
That's another promo. But this sense, I don't mean nihilism in the hyperbolic sense, but in the real philosophical sense of what nihilism is this acceptance that not everything is great all the time, and bad stuff does just happen. And so, I mean, if you want to talk about climate, let's talk about that. Like the reality of what the world looks like for young people is different to, like the conversations that a lot of young people have with their grandparents, for example.
The challenge is, except that the science absolutely supports that we screwed this up.
Yeah, totally. And so I think that is often sometimes in my experience where there's a bit of disconnect intergenerational as well, is this like, oh, come on, guys, get up off your asses. Like, it's not that bad. Stop. Just get involved in the church because everything's hunky-dory and blah, 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 blah. And what that's missing is a connection with the reality of what being a young person is in a lot of cases. It's looking around yourself at the world and going, oh, damn, like not everything is actually great. Like there are things that we need to work on as church communities, as wider communities, as people that live on a space rock. Like they're all of these layers of things that we need to reckon with, that like it's our fault, whether it's generations before us fault, whatever it is, even things that aren't our fault, things that just suck sometimes. And I think something that has the ability to turn people away from the church is a refusal to recognize that and a refusal to engage with that and go, well, if they're not going to take this seriously, then I'm going to find somewhere else.
It's because it's about taking responsibility, mate. Part of the challenge, and I've had some difficult conversations with older relatives and even my dad about, particularly, let's just stick with climate change. In part of the reason why they disregard it or think it's not as bad as it is or whatever they're saying is because it means that they have to take responsibility. They're culpable. They helped play into it. Now, I acknowledge that the climate change has been a fair while coming. It didn't start last year. And so it is a generational problem. And for a large part of it, we didn't know any better, right? Let's burn all of the things because the industrial age is upon us, and have a look at how fast we can go. Amazing. How good is this now? We have trains that go quick. Industry is able to build things for everybody, mass produce all sorts of stuff where before we couldn't, because we've been able to develop and mechanize and use this coal power and electricity and stuff. Cars get us from point A to point B, transformed the way that we engaged in the world because of the fact we can burn this seemingly endless supply of oil and fuel, and hooray for us. And it started in probably the boomers generation, my parents' age, where they started to see some implications. They couldn't put their fingers on it. And now, again, 2023, we can see really clearly that this is the impact and this is what we need to do to fix it and change it. The same can be said about the church. The same generations look back and go, if I have to acknowledge that things are not as great as I thought they were, it means that I have to take responsibility for things not being as great as they are. And that's painful. That hurts. And that's my generation too, right? I'm a Generation X kid. I have to take responsibility for that as well, particularly because I decided to hang around in the institution. A whole bunch of my peers left, which is why we in part have this void, between little people and 50, 60-year-olds. They left. Now, they left for myriad reasons. Different friends I speak to, some left because they were disengaged, disenfranchised, cast out because of their sexual identity or choices around gender or their lived experience. And some of them just left because they were sick of asking and being told to wait for opportunities to be engaged in mission, ministry, and leadership. And that is something that I will rail against until the day I die. We absolutely. My experience in the church, I remember as a late teen, young adult, loving the congregation that I was a part of at the time. So, I loved all of them, but the one that I was in at the time, loved it. They cared for me. They supported me, helped form me in my relationship with Jesus. Phenomenal. And I started to ask questions about how can I be, I'm young, I've got energy, I want to be involved in helping make things happen. What's eldership about? What does that mean? How can it wait your turn when you're older? Mate, I'm 49 in less than a month and I'm still waiting my turn. So part of the focus for me in my ministry, both personally and professionally, is I see a lot of opportunities where, and I lament this a little bit, but I'm also really pragmatic and really focused on what this means. My turn has passed me by and I'm at peace with that. My job now is to, at best, cut the vines down to find a gap and then shepherd young people through, encourage them to race ahead and get things going. Or at its worst, push old people out of the way to give young people a go. Now, I don't mean put, poorly formed, ill-prepared, inexperienced young people into roles of great responsibility. I mean, let's find ways to engage them and grow them into some of those opportunities so that maybe we think about, you know what, instead of, and let's take eldership as a responsibility, bring them on as elders, but not expect them to know everything. In fact, let's assign a wise head, someone with some good experience and even possibly that's, in an elderly context. There's a one-on-one relationship, mentoring kind of vibe that is there to encourage them, debrief with them after meetings, to talk about, not to tell them this is what you need to think, which is why it becomes a really challenging role to fill, because lots of old people love to tell you what to think. Hell, I'm not old and I'll tell you what to think. Really provide a space where young people can question and ponder and tease out the details so they get a deeper understanding, so that we can better prepare them for those roles. And that's just the ones that we find within our movement, right? At the same time, look, this is a big gear change, so you can probably shut this off if you need to, Jonty. At the same time, I believe that our movement, particularly in struggling because we didn't have young people, and how do we solve this? Oh, well, we need to train them as leaders. Mate, we sold the cow of discipleship for the magic beans of leadership. Leadership will solve everything. I mean, just have a look around. How's that going? Really? We've been focused on leadership for easily the past 10 years. particularly leadership with young people. And while we do have some incredible leaders that have grown out of that or found ways to develop in their faith and take us as a movement into some pretty amazing places, we've forgotten what our core business is. And that's discipleship, growing disciples, helping people of all ages, particularly from my perspective, young people, engage in a deep personal relationship with God to find ways that the Holy Spirit can challenge and move them and shape them and grow them so that every day they can be more like Jesus. And as an outcome, encourage their friends to be the same. Like, it sounds, even coming out of my mouth to my ear, sounds, that's too simple, Molk. It can't be that easy. Mate, we know it's tough work. We know it's hard to be a part of that. And yet the heavy lifting that our movement and every church has to be engaged in is discipling young people, not discipling to our denomination, discipling them to be more like Jesus. When we can change gears so that we recognize that leadership is an outcome of discipleship and not the other way around. And for the people that are pushing this, particularly within our denomination, they might say that, Molk, that's what we're always intending and what we're doing. That's not the way you're selling it. Just taking young people within the life of our movement, say we want you to grow and be leaders. Mate, how's your relationship with Jesus? Why are you still using Tinder? Like, what's going on in your life that is not helping you grow in your faith experience such that your deep desire becomes to be someone who just wants to love all of their friends, all of the people that they run into in the way that Jesus loves them, and to see them in that way and acknowledge that we're not going to get it right all the time, and yet still persists and still pushes in and wants to grow and wants to develop a theology that is inclusive and honoring of God and reflective of the stuff that we learn both from the Bible and from the people who have great wisdom within the faith. This is paramount, and absolutely for mine, the focus that at least the young adult stream and ministry within Pulse is going to be focusing on for the next couple of years. We need to focus on what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. Courageous discipleship and what that looks like has to be our calling card. We shouldn't be known as the denomination that produces great leaders. We should be known as the denomination that produces great disciples of Jesus. That's it.
You've sort of identified almost like a little subcategory that I think I recognize but hadn't quite put not that it needs a label, but I know so many of these people in my life that have a desire to have deep connection with faith and with community and but are in congregations or communities, or however you want to break that, like the structural thing up, that aren't investing in them, or that aren't providing the right environment for them to become disciples themselves and grow in their discipleship, but then disciple other people. So they're not people that have no interest in the church. They're not people that are deeply engaged and flourishing in the church. They're almost this middle group that are, let's say, tolerating, putting up with, and I think this goes back to this conversation about intergenerational ministry and how people of older generations interact with younger people in the church, that they're just putting up with not being allowed to take part in the faith community to their fullest ability, because that's just what it's always been like, as opposed to, no, it is actually within your right to put up your hand and say, I'm a valued part of this community. I want to be invested in, and we were talking about the Growing Young book earlier, and that there's one of them's the keychain leadership, just handing over the keys. Give me the keys. I want to and I think that's a bit of a light bulb moment for me, and just going, how do we engage with, like, we spend lots of time thinking about how we can engage with the people that are on the fringe that might be floating away from the church. How can we bring them back in? How can we sort of engage with those people? How do we relight the fire with the people that are still in the church, that have just sort of slid back into second year and are not, they've kind of almost learnt that, like, I mean, how many times have I heard the phrase, oh, we need to invest in young people because they're the future of the church? Makes me want to throw up. No, they're not the future of the church. They are the church. Like, telling people
the same as you're the church, the same as your parents are the church.
Exactly.
Everyone's the church.
Everyone's the church. And telling young people, it's like what you were saying earlier about, like, just wait your turn. I hate that. Like, that makes me want to throw up. Like, you are the church now. And I think identifying that as a symptom of a church culture, not just in the Uniting Church, I see it with friends that are in different denominations as well, that has built up this tolerance for just being like, wait your turn, sit in the wings, go on autopilot, and then when you're older, you can start to kick in and take.
Like it's item number 3 on Molk's shit list, right? Like when it comes to the church, this is where we land. The lie of intergenerational ministry. The thing that we find is that, so we talk about ministry with families and children, ministry with youth, ministry with young adults, and then this idea that there's this extra category of intergenerational ministry, like we need to, we're a church that we're going to start this new intergenerational ministry thing. I think if you extract intergenerationalism from being church, then you've screwed it up straight away. The very nature of being in that community, being a church, is that we are all meant to get along and be a part of and engaged deeply in each other's lives. And that is a 360 experience. It is old people caring for young people. It is young people helping and supporting and caring for old people and everybody in between. Suggesting that we're going to try this new intergenerational thing is not a thing. That's just how church is. And we have, because of this void in the middle, we've allowed it to kind of go, oh, well, if we start an intergenerational thing, then the old people will care for the little people and they'll grow older and they'll hang around. Bam, bam. No, they won't, because the old people will either die or they will get older when those young people get older, and all of a sudden they'll become distant to them again because they don't actually know who they are. They haven't stayed in touch or connected with them. It was just quaint to sit down and draw something with a crayon. It's great that we have all of these ministry opportunities and paths and programs to engage older people with little people. They absolutely do not connect youth and young adults into that at all. In fact, they entirely disregard them right through up until probably the parents of those little people, who then are really only turning up because they're the transport mechanism. And then there's another gap because then, well, I'm now the parent of teens. I'm not going to go and turn up to, paint a picture and draw with a crayon.
Send them to you on Friday. Job done.
I mean, sure, in that context, well, there is that, right? But it's. I say the lie of intergenerational ministry because when we disconnect intergenerationality from who we are as the church, we've buggered it up. Just the same as I would say that when we think about, focusing on the young people, we're actually missing the point. If church was so great, Jonty, right? If church was so amazing, it would be 3 times the size it was, because every old person would be bringing every one of their neighbours. And they're not. For all of the reasons that we outlined before, because they don't want to share their faith, because it's confronting. You don't talk about faith. You don't talk about religion and politics. All of those sorts of things. Why would young people want to get involved in a place that you don't even want to bring your friends to?
The fact that we even have to, I'm sure you've taken part in many youth group things over the years, and bring a friend next week because it's a really good one. Like, this is a good one. The fact that we even need to encourage people, hey, remember to try and bring your friends. Like, if it was something that they really, really valued and found life in, they'd be doing that anyway. It's the same with old people not bringing their mates along.
The catch is, I think for young people, it's helpful to remind them that but it's your motivation. If your motivation is, we had 100 kids at youth group this week because we went to laser tag or whatever. I mean, we need to be encouraging young people to share their faith and to welcome their friends and invite them to church and show them that it's not full of scary things and it is a safe place for them to be. That's the mechanism behind why we want to do that. That said, duster hockey and musical chairs are not going to cut it as youth group games anymore. And in fact, even this notion of activity-based youth group is cooked. In 2023, young people have a much broader variety. They don't have to go to laser tag with youth group. They can go to laser tag any flogging time they want, or the movies, or to the water park with all the big bouncy things, or all of those sorts of things. They don't need permission to go with the youth group. They can just go themselves or go with their mates. The benefit of a big activity from a youth group perspective is that if you size it right, or the economies of scale, you can do some crazy stuff that they would never do. Like, and as the example, this is something I think has a massive opportunity for a youth group event. Book 8 or 10 big inflatable things. You know, there's millions of things that you can get that are inflatable, whether they're castles or what's the vertical, horizontal bungee or whatever it is, right? And you just set it up and say, go for it. You know, whether you want to run, group versus group challenges, or it's just here's a free for all, don't kill each other, go. Like, just the size and scale of that is absolutely something that you want everyone to come and be involved in. And if there's, what's the reason for it? What's the reason for all of it? Relationship. I can't build a relationship with your friend if you don't bring them. You bring them along, they get to see, Jonty and Molk, look, they're idiots, but they're fun. I'll come along. They didn't beat me over the head with a Bible. They actually cared about me. And I only learned that because I came back a second time and they remembered my name. They remembered where I went to school or whose friend I was, and they remembered something else about me. And you don't find those things out unless you talk to them, if you're not trying to grow a relationship with them. This is everything that we have to be focused. This is why that intergenerational notion disconnects reality within the life of church. The life of church is we need to be engaged in that way in each other's lives. We need to be building relationship because we are here all for the same reason. The commonality we share when we gather for church is that we want to be a part of what God is doing. We're not here to sing the hymns that I love, to hear a sermon preached at the length that makes me feel comfortable, and to know that I've shown up. Part of the tension between young people and old people since Adam and Cain had an argument is that Adam liked it one way and Cain likes it something different. And it has continued, and we will continue to see it, mate. What the organ debate, the drums debate, the Hillsong music debate, contemporary worship debate, the whatever it is, it will continue and it will continue and it will continue because we are broken humans who are in need of Jesus and are not willing to give an inch about something. Something is so sacred to us within the life of our faith experience that we're not willing to say, you know what, for the good of Jesus, I'm going to go, that's cool.
And so often one group of people goes to church in the morning and the other goes to church in the evening, so they don't.
It's why we have. It's not, we don't have multiple services because we physically can't fit people into the building. There are a couple of instances with that, and that's fine. Lord, come, so that might be the case more and more and more. The reality is, I look at my church, we have 3 separate services on Sunday: traditional, family, and I'm going to say youth, but there's a big asterisk there. And the biggest difference are the songs.
Yeah.
In fact, I know the only difference are the songs and the people who read the Bible because they turn up, the people who participate because they're there. Because I see what our minister produces. He preaches the same sermon at all 3. We have the same running sheet with different songs in place in all 3. The only caveats will be this week we've got a baptism at the family service. This week we've got someone's getting confirmed or whatever in the night service or whatever. That's it. That's it. We could all, lifestyle plays into it, sure. Why does lifestyle play into it? Because we're inherently selfish. Musical choice plays into it. Why? Because we're inherently selfish. The things that separate and divide us in this regard are not going to grow the kingdom of God. And it is ludicrous that we think that the night youth service started because all of the old people went, that's great, you can do that, just don't mess up my service.
Yep.
How much better would that service have been if they went, you know what? Fill your boots. We're here to worship God. We're here together to be a part of this. And we recognize that by being here, we get to invest in and care about a whole bunch of other people that are going to come along that we might never have seen. And yet if you turned up to the traditional service and said, this week, no hymns, someone's going to stand up and play guitar and all of the songs are no older than 10 years, people would be too polite to walk out, but geez, you get the complaints.
Oh, totally.
Again, generalization, but you follow the methodology, right? So, same, dare I say, as if you rocked up to the youth service and said, tonight we're singing 4 hymns.
Yep. Same thing. Works
and they're being played on an organ.
Yeah. We and the reality of trying to rectify that, in my experience, has been the 10 a.m. combined service, which is essentially the 9 a.m. service at 10 a.m.
Yes.
But great. But any like discussion of, hey, why don't we, one week, let's do a combined service at 6 o'clock, 6:30.
How many people don't show up to the combined services when you're on them? Heaps.
Like, combined service, it's just the morning service an hour later, and no one, and there's no evening service, so no one goes.
And what's their excuses for not turning up? Too many people, can't handle all the people. Look, there's some mental health issues with that for some people, and I get it. Really, it's just your comfort factor and someone sat in your seat once. Parking's tough, sure. Parking's tough in some places. I'm unfamiliar with the music. You'd be bold if somebody says that, but it doesn't suit my lifestyle. It doesn't fit into my day, mate. Honestly, modern Christians have become great at manufacturing excuses about why we can't do stuff.
Yeah.
Modern Christianity.
Friend of the podcast, Jack. G'day, Jack. We were having a conversation about a lot of this stuff. Such a simple observation that I think cuts so deep. It's like, well, nothing that you try and implement is going to work if no one shows up. You just got to show up. You've just got to cut the bullshit and go, no, this is actually, as a member of this congregation, a part of this community, this is an important thing for me to take part. Not just for my sake, but for the sake of everyone else.
Yeah.
Nothing will work unless people show up. Just show up. And often that's all that is required of us. And for the Spirit to move, like that's nothing that we can do. All we have to do is show up and the Spirit will be there.
Oh, mate,
just don't even show up in the first place. What are you expecting to happen?
Invite people to participate by showing up, right? This notion, even down to, we've got rosters to fill and those sorts of things. Stop asking for volunteers. Ask people to participate in the life, worship, and witness of God. Encourage them to find a way to be a part of that. Everybody can participate. Not everyone can volunteer. Invite people to participate more. And you're right, talk about these kind of, together gatherings or whatever it is as something that's important within the life of our church. You start to press all it because, look, it's not manipulation. I don't want to go down this path, but follow me. There is an element of herding cats when it comes to engaging anybody in anything, particularly ministry with young adults. Do not start me. We have to be in a position where we are leaning on relationship, where we are pressing buttons around people, the people that will attend because, it's important, so we have to turn up. Whatever it is, don't lie. Whatever we have to do to encourage people to participate and get them involved and push their buttons so they recognize and register that this is a thing that we want to be a part of, do it. Engage people in all of that stuff. The important thing is that when we're wanting people to take some responsibility, they are participating in what God is doing. They are not turning up and going, how great am I at reading the Bible? How great am I at playing this instrument? How great am I at greeting someone at the door? Or conversely, I couldn't do that because I don't like people. I can't read the Bible because it's full of old horrible names. Sure, you might have a public speaking phobia. There is ways to get around that. It is 2022. I will film you on my iPhone, whatever we need to do. There are literally so many ways that people can participate within the life of a church's witness. And again, it is lifestyle. It is selfishness. It is perceived inability that hold people back. And all three of those things absolutely should be stepped over and swept out the door as quick as we can. Picked up like the stinky dog poos that they are. Because it's just not truth.
So to wrap this up, we have, and I think
yes, we have. That's
to
correct.
talk about the things that
Sure, I understand.
we need to identify. But I think there's lots of there's lots of things that are still worth celebrating in all of these spaces.
Yes, absolutely.
What do you see? Like what are some wins that you're seeing at the moment with young people in church spaces?
Oh, look, I'll focus primarily on young adult ministry because that's what I'm closest to and what my eyeballs are keenly honed on. I'm seeing some congregations that take seriously their ministry with young adults, that don't shy away from the hard conversations, whether it is conversation about a sexual ethic, whether it is conversation about discipleship, whether it is conversations about participation within the broad life of the church. I think that's really amazing. I'm seeing congregations that either through ignorance or they're just not aware of it have released their young people to take some ownership around some stuff that are they're saying, well, we'll run our own small group, we'll do our own thing. And I acknowledge in part that a cohort mechanism around that helps make that go. A critical mass of people helps people stay connected. However, it's in doing that then there is an accountability within that group that is like, oh, hey, we missed you. Or, we not even that we knew that you couldn't make it, because that's, hey, guys, I'd love to be there, but I can't this week because of reason. But when those reasons start to pile up, people are not just sort of casting them out. It's like, hey, what's going on? Can we find a better way? Another night, something else. How can we keep you involved? Because you're important to us. And they're starting to model, not that maybe their older church members are recognizing, but they're starting to model a way of this deep and intentional community with each other that is very much the life of the church. I'm continually buoyed by some of the leadership within the life of our movement in this synod that releases people to just go and do stuff. Good. So why aren't we doing it? Sometimes we talk a big game and say, but they'll never let us do it. Just do it. Just go and do it. Sure, you might need to arrange with someone to have a space to do it in or whatever, and fill out your risk assessment. Like, let's keep the legal things legal, do the stuff we have to do, but just do it. If you think that the best thing might be, well, instead of having a night service, let's turn that into a meal. Let's eat together and share conversation and do that and grow relationship that way. Yeah. The problem often is that, Jonty, people look at stuff and go, it's hard work, and they shy away from it because of that. I mean, fine. You know your barriers and you know what you can do. I'm buoyed by the fact that we are, our movement particularly, are encouraging some faithful young people into some leadership opportunities and not dropping them in them, that they are growing them into them. I think a thing that we are starting to do better and will continue to do is to help young people, particularly our young adults, consider vocational calls into ministry, whether it's to be the best accountant for God that they can be, or the best musician for God that they can be, or heaven forfend, actually think about becoming a rev or a deacon, or finding, a foothold in ministry within the life of their congregational presbytery, particularly in ministry with young people. And part of what we're trying to do with Pulse is develop and put forward some training mechanism to help for young people that want to step into, and not just young, obviously anybody, but particularly young people that might come in lacking some experience and lacking some runs on the board, so that we can support them. Because when we got rid of the specified ministry of pastor, we also got rid of the training for it. So as soon as you remove any opportunity to develop people into a role, you're pretty much saying we don't think the role's important, we're cutting it away. So then we now find ourselves where there's lots of congregations with enthusiastic, particularly young people, but enthusiastic people in paid roles in ministry that flounder a little because they just don't have some experience and understanding. And so we need to be caring for them and particularly supporting them. And there's some congregations that are taking some risks and providing some great support to young people in those fresh roles. At the same time, if we can improve on something in that way, Jonty, I think we need to give up on this idea of anything less than a part-time youth ministry, youth worker role. Because part-time is the bare minimum. And I know that gets expensive. And look, that can be another conversation for another time. And if anyone's listening that wants to fight me about it, I'll meet you outside. As soon as you say to somebody, hey, we want to give you a part-time role, straight away you're telling them that unless they're in the super privileged position of having a vehicle that they don't have to pay off, living in a place where they don't have to pay any bills and they don't have to buy any food, that therefore they can work for the church, but they also then don't have to find another job to help cover all of those things. And at least in Sydney, that is impossible. There should be more opportunity for 3/4 to full-time roles and for congregations to seriously take an opportunity. And there are mechanisms within the life of the church where congregations can say, we've got enough money for a half-time, and you can apply for grant funding. And all of a sudden, for 5 years, you've got the money that tops it up to full-time. Best result ever. Anyone that says that, hey, we've got this, 0.2, 0.3, ministry position for a youth worker or a children's and families worker, you're kidding yourself. You are setting that person up to fail. They might be the most gifted, the most talented, the most incredible person when it comes to engagement in ministry. 0.2 is nothing. It's a day a week. So are you making them work on Sunday or Friday? How many meetings are you going to shift so that they can happen during their work hours? It's the logistics behind it are insanity. And short of a congregation being so small that it can't afford a full-time minister, you would never see it happen. Because they recognise funds, financials. And I know that there are congregations going, Molk, we'd love to have a full-time youth worker. We can only afford a 0.2 or a 0.3. There are so many ways to grow that. Like I said, half-time is your bare minimum, We're at that point, Jonty, where we're starting to get some things really working, And like when you grow a fire, just as you get those first little sparks and embers and the flames, just early, you've really got to give it some oxygen. You've got to make sure you've got the right fuel. If you put too big a log on, it's not going to do anything. Just the right things to help that really nurture it to grow. There are so many of those little spot fires everywhere that we just need to continue to nurture. And eventually they will take hold, and that will be phenomenal. Right now, so many of them in that critical kind of moment that we need to nudge them, give them oxygen, give them the fuel, and help make them be things. Because otherwise, and this is always the other difficult thing, I know it's ending with a downer, when people get burnt by those situations because they got burnt out or it was too hard or became difficult, they didn't get the support that they needed, it's not just the person in ministry that gets hurt. It's the congregation that then gets gun shy, in trying to pull the trigger again. And that's to the detriment of the people in their wider community and to the detriment of the kingdom of God. There's so much good stuff happening. And I'm keen to encourage that and to call that out and to promote that. Take a chance. We need to encourage more congregations and more young people particularly to take a chance.
What's next for Pulse? We're the end of December 2022, sorry.
Yeah.
So what's on the horizon? What can people keep an eye out for?
Yeah, look, a big 2023 ahead, that's for sure. We've got part of what Pulse does is some critical kind of economy of scale events that we offer to the different ministry streams. So Kids Camp Out for your grade 4 up, I think it is coming back in 2023. And that is a phenomenal one-night camp for little people. Often it's their first night to sleep over. Come with your groups, whether you want a tent or bring a caravan. There are some limited dorm spaces, so you can sleep in a real bed under a roof. And And it's just amazing. And as a part of that, we provide some training for first-time youth leaders. So young people who maybe have graduated from grade 6 to 7 or 7 to 8, and they're getting involved in children's ministry. We provide a little bit of training during that evening and across the weekend for them to grow that skill. So kids camp out. I'm going to say it's coming in April. Check the Pulse calendar, which is on the Pulse website, pulse.uca.org.au. In the second week of the September school holidays is UYC, our second UYC. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal. We had a great time this year. That's high schoolers, grade 7 to 11. The only reason we don't invite grade 12s is because we know it's deep in HSC time. However, if you're a grade 12 and you're not doing HSC, feel free to register and come along. We'd love to have you. And that we need lots of young adult leaders for always every year. So the connection, so you start to see our ministry grow through these rite of passage events, and then a half step or a back step in ministry opportunity. You know, once you become a young adult, you've got heaps to offer children's and youth ministry. Not all of them all the time, but pick your battles. Come and be involved in that. And then our young adult ministry across the year, we'll have some more gatherings next year, but we're kicking it off at the start of the year in February, 3rd to the 5th. Actually, 2nd to the 5th, because we've thrown in some extra discipleship leadership training at the start of it. But Retreat Yourself is happening at Gerringong in February. People should register now. $200 if you register before the 31st of December. It will be a phenomenal gathering of young adults. God will be at work in the midst of that. And I believe it's like a $10 Palmer down at the RSL. If you want to do that on Friday night, that'll be my plan. Beautiful spot at Gerringong. It'll be a great... So that's just the highlights, right? ULEAD Plus is also kicking off for young adults that want to look at a deeper journey into theology and faith and formation and the kinds of big, deep, dirty questions that you can get asked and grow through together. So that'll be a great opportunity. And beyond that, look, just Pulse wanting to engage in the life of your congregation. How can we support you? If you've got ministry with young people, what does it look? Invite us along to preach. Invite us along to come and share in that time with you, and encourage you, and dare I say it, even challenge you. If you don't have young people, invite us along to give you a kick up the butt, and you want to get involved. If you don't have young people and you don't want to get involved, invite us along and I'll say some nice things and it'll be wonderful, and then you can give some money to Pulse. Look, there's heaps, even a little bit of a shake-up within the life of the Pulse team as things progress. Look, all I can say is watch this space around what Pulse is doing next year. Definitely check out the website, pulse.uca.org.au. We're UCA Pulse on Insta and on TikTok, and we send a newsletter out every month that you might want to get involved in. All of that's on our website. You can find it all there. Look, the short answer is, if I haven't connected with you, reach out. I'll buy you a coffee. Let's have a chat. I want to hear what God is doing in your life. And I'd love to know what you think about the state of play in your congregation and how you can be a part of making it better.
And the sort of conversations that we've been having today, I find so often people are a little bit afraid of just being honest. Those are the important conversations. If you feel really strongly about something, but you feel like you're not in a space where it's, I don't want to say safe because that's a word that has much more important connotations, but like you're in a space that you feel like it is controversial to say what you really think about something that you value so deeply. Spaces where it's really important to have those conversations in a safe way. So I want to encourage people as well. If any of the stuff that we've been talking about young people in your congregation, if you feel like it's been like a fire's been lit under you, or you've been prompted to think or do or say something, they're the conversations that need to be had, because as we've talked about and as has been pointed out by everyone, the church is in decline, and it's up to us to do something about it. So just have the conversation, even if it's just with one person. Go have a coffee. Because what that's the other thing is, my experience is once you've said something to a certain degree, you can't take it back. It's now out in the world. So if you've got a really sick idea for something, so many things in the life of my church started as, hey, wouldn't it be a cool idea if we did this?
Yes.
Because it was just in someone's head, it didn't happen for a while, but someone said it to someone else, all of a sudden it's real. all of a sudden.
Big trouble all of a sudden there. And I want to encourage, despite evidence in this podcast, I've got two big shoulders and two big ears. I love to listen. I love to hear what's going on in your life. So if you do want to catch up and have a coffee or whatever your beverage is, I'm down with that. Feel free to say, hey, Molk, would love to have a chat, or I want to ask you about, or I want to take you to task on this thing that you said. I'm welcome to that. I do not profess, despite my conviction that we've shared today, I do not profess to have all of the answers or to know everything yet. I'm still working on that.
Aren't we all? Chipping away at it. Thank you for joining us. We will definitely do this again in the new year.
Thanks, man. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been heaps of fun. We've got some exciting things coming up next year as well, which we would love to have you a part of. I'll have to get you on the podcast with Ness, because I feel like that would be
so good.
An amazing conversation as well. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Once again, links to everything Pulse related will be down below. If you like this podcast, you can support us by leaving a 5-star review for the show on your chosen podcast platform. This really helps us to cut through to audiences more efficiently and helps us to get the algorithm a little bit more on our side to suggest our show to new listeners. Honestly though, the best way you can support this show is just by telling your friends about it. If there's someone in your life who you think would enjoy listening to the show, take this as your prompt to go and tell them about it. You can find us on socials, or you can get in touch more directly by emailing us at filthyhopepod@gmail.com. That's all for this week, and we'll see you again very soon. But until then, always remember, take Jesus seriously and don't be a dick.